On April 5, 1992, Alberto Fujimori dissolved Congress, suspended the 1979 Constitution, intervened in the judiciary, and seized control of key state institutions. He also ordered the military occupation of Lima and censored several media outlets, thus establishing a state of emergency where the executive branch would concentrate all power backed by the armed forces. The Self-Coup, that personal project of Vladimiro Montesinos, was finally a reality. He had been its main architect and had been working on this project for a long time. His first move was to modify the traditional promotion system of the armed forces through a supreme decree. This allowed him to grant power to his trusted generals and secure the loyalty of the high command. Piece by piece, he rearranged the military leadership to his convenience, and once all the pieces were in place, the most important appointment came: General Nicolas de Bari, Hermosa Rios as Commander General of the Army, the highest military rank. But Hermosa knew that this wasn't entirely true. That was where the secret lay. In that new power structure, there was an even higher rank, one that wasn't listed in any regulations, a position without a name, but with a face that emerged from the shadows. That of Vladimiro Montesinos. General Hermosa knew it perfectly well and agreed that it should be that way. That's why he was chosen. Vladimiro had built a board with precision, and now every piece seemed to be in its place. But he knew internal control alone wasn't enough to consolidate power. He also needed international approval. So he turned to his connections with the CIA to try to convince the American State Department that the Self-Coup was not an authoritarian act but a temporary and absolutely necessary measure to prevent Peru from collapsing. He argued that terrorism threatened to destroy the state and would probably succeed, since Congress had become the biggest obstacle, a nest of corruption and inefficiency that only hindered the government's actions in the fight against Sendero Luminoso and the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement. He promised them that the new regime would be more effective, more stable, and above all, would guarantee the strategic interests of the United States in the region. It worked. Washington agreed with him. With that support, international pressure began to fade. Even the Organization of American States, which had initially condemned the Self-Coup, ended up accepting the transition process without isolating Peru. On April 18, 1992, just 13 days after announcing Congress's dissolution, Alberto Fujimori traveled to Washington to appear before the Organization of American States Permanent Council. Starring in an unprecedented scene, a president who had just broken the constitutional order sat in front of the foreign ministers of the Americas to defend his own coup. After his intervention, the Organization of American States decided not to apply the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which would have meant the suspension of Peru from the organization. In just 2 weeks, the country had gone from international condemnation to acceptance, a true diplomatic triumph that Vladimiro had already carefully calculated. His moves seemed to fit with millimetric precision within his plan. Of course, this boosted his ego and confidence, but he still had several stages to complete. The next thing on his roadmap was to prove to everyone that the strategy had been the right one, that it wasn't just words. For this, he needed another decisive victory that could legitimize the Self-Coup both within the country and to the world, something so big that no one could ignore it until the opportunity came. On September 12, 1992, an elite unit of the National Police called the Special Intelligence Group, known as Special Intelligence Group, carried out Operation Victory, which ended with the capture of Vladimiro Guzman, Shining Path's top leader and Peru's most feared man. That day changed the country's direction due to both the capture and consolidation of power. Various intelligence sources and later testimonies claimed that the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional had already located the terrorist leader long before. However, Vladimiro decided to wait. He needed the strike to happen at the exact right moment. If Guzman had fallen earlier, the Self-Coup wouldn't have seemed so essential. Everything had to fit into the perfect timing, and Vladimiro didn't miss a single detail. Even the staging of the arrest was meticulously calculated. Guzman was presented before the camera's cage, dressed in a striped suit, furiously shouting behind the bars. The image went around the world, becoming a symbol of the new regime's efficiency. Of course, the capture of Abimael Guzman has nuances and secrets that deserve their own story. That story is coming soon, like the one about Alberto Fujimori's first government. But this one focuses on Vladimiro Montesinos Torres, the mastermind who controlled the state from behind the scenes, and everything he did once they were finally in his hands. In the regime's early years, Vladimiro Montesinos acted as Alberto Fujimori's political operator with top military officials. From the beginning, that was one of his most important roles. He knew how to talk to them, how to read them, how to identify who would be the most useful or loyal to the power project that both of them were building. Fujimori liked his government's military atmosphere, but still felt like an outsider to that world and its customs. He could talk to lower-ranking officers without difficulty, but he froze up in front of the top generals. He didn't like them, he didn't understand their humor or their codes, and he felt out of place at those endless camaraderie lunches, full of rituals, inside jokes, and invisible hierarchies. His cold and reserved character kept him distant from his main allies, from those who supported his power. He made the effort for them, but soon Fujimori would get tired of that emotional expense. Even more so when at his right hand he had the ever-attentive Vladimiro, always so helpful, offering to take care of those tedious relationships. From then on, Montesinos became a bridge, an intermediary between the president and his armed forces, gradually weaving a network of loyalties, a web that seemed impossible to break. Vladimiro knew how to take advantage of Alberto Fujimori's social weakness and led him to a comfort zone that he eventually embraced. As the months went by, he began to completely delegate the management of the military and intelligence apparatus to his advisor. Soon, Vladimiro Montesinos would become intoxicated by the power he had built and would use it for many things he had been imagining for years. But he knew that if he wanted to keep it, the first thing was to confront the growing insurgency from all sides. During the first years of the regime, he imposed multiple operations, some known in public, others completely secret and unconventional, where the boundaries between law and violence began to blur. Some of the darkest chapters of the government would be born from those operations, mainly those led by a clandestine army squad, created in October 1991 to respond to the terrorist escalation of Shining Path under the direct supervision of the National Intelligence Service. Its name was the Colina Group, and its mission was to conduct surveillance, arrests, extrajudicial executions, and disappearances of people classified as terrorists by Army intelligence. These secret operations would turn into massacres that, years later, would seal the fate of those who were running the country. The first one happened on November 3rd, 1991, when the Colina Group, led by its commander, Santiago Martin Rivas, burst in with machine guns at a gathering in the Barrios Altos district. And they brutally murdered 15 people, including a child who was only 8 years old. 3 months later, on January 29, 1992, the squad executed 6 farmers in the district of Patavilca. And on July 18 of that same year, they entered La Cantuda University. They kidnapped 9 students and a professor, took them to an unknown location in Huachipa and executed them, burned their bodies, and buried them in clandestine graves. These brutal acts were justified as a strategy to eliminate terrorist hotspots in the face of a legal framework considered ineffective. They argued that it was necessary to annihilate the enemy before they attacked or expanded, something that had been happening in an overwhelming way. However, that logic ended up destroying innocent lives. It was hard to tell who was actually a terrorist and who was not. But the murder of a small child marked a point of no return. It was crucial to ensure that the Colina Group had taken the lives of innocent people. Years later, the courts determined that these massacres were part of a state policy plan and approved by the highest levels of power. Alberto Fujimori and Vladimiro Montesinos were accused of indirect authorship for these crimes and were eventually convicted for them, and also for what happened on April 6, 1992, when a group of agents from the Army Intelligence Service violently broke into the journalist's house. Gustavo Garidi, known for his investigations into corruption and human rights violations without a court order, was subdued, hooded, and taken to the Army headquarters, known as El Pentagonito. He was held there incommunicado for nearly 2 days. Garidi was considered an enemy of the state and was interrogated, pressured, and kept incommunicado, while the government justified his disappearance as part of the new emergency order. Ultimately, under increasing pressure, Vladimiro Montesinos ordered his release. That kidnapping would later become another of the legal cases that would send him to prison, but that would come years later. The path to power was just beginning for Montesinos. He had dreamed of it for decades, and everything was going so well that he didn't realize it could all end someday. After all, he was operating under a larger strategy, the ultra-secret Green Plan, a project developed within the armed forces that proposed establishing a guided democracy for the next 2 or 3 decades. The Green Plan did not consider eliminating elections. On the contrary, it needed them to legitimize the regime, but these would be managed from the shadows, controlled by an intelligent military corps that would govern the country in silence. In this way, Montesinos planned to perpetuate the power he had achieved and was preparing for any threat. One of them appeared on November 13, 1992, when General Jaime Salinas Seido attempted an uprising to restore the constitutional order that had been broken after the Self-Coup. Salinas, together with a group of officers, had designed a secret operation to take control of strategic points in Lima, arrest Fujimori and Montesinos, restore Congress, and call for new elections. At midnight, they took over Channel 2 and broadcast a brief but bold message, calling on the population and the armed forces to rise up against the dictatorship and to reject the April 5th Self-Coup. What Salinas didn't know was that he had already lost this game before it even started, since Montesinos knew every detail of the conspiracy, and he was several steps ahead. In less than 3 hours, troops loyal to the government surrounded the rebel positions and foiled the uprising without firing a single shot. Salinas and his officers were arrested. The operation was swift, and that attempt to overthrow the regime ended in a resounding failure. This defeat definitively consolidated the control of the Fujimori-Montesinos duo over the armed forces. Since then, no one ever tried to conspire against the government again. Montesinos' maneuver was impressive and effective, another reason to earn the president's absolute admiration and trust. A few months later, Fujimori would follow one of his most intimate pieces of advice: to move with him to Correios, to the offices of the National Intelligence Service. The headquarters had been expanded and remodeled for months. A huge second floor had been built to accommodate multiple tasks. Among them were the anti-subversive war, the fight against drug trafficking, the external front, and above all, political espionage. It was precisely this last area that made it possible to neutralize Salinas' uprising, thanks to the systematic interception of key calls. That's why they decided to strengthen it. Telephone espionage grew rapidly. New interception centers were acquired, capable of tapping hundreds of lines, which made it necessary to bring in dozens of agents. To process that incessant torrent of information, the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional began to expand like a living organism. Montesinos ordered the walls and entrances reinforced and a helipad built on the roof, but the true focus was psychological, not architectural. Vladimiro was building his own world, a secret refuge where the president could feel comfortable, protected, and increasingly dependent on him. They had already shared an office before: Juana Fujimori's house during the campaign, the government palace, El Pentagonito. But nowhere would they feel as safe as on that second floor of the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional. Montesinos was convinced that this building would be the center of power in Peru and the home he would share with the president. An unexpected element favored this plan: the marital crisis between Alberto Fujimori and Susanna Higuchi, which by then had reached unforeseen and deeply unpleasant levels. Montesinos saw the conflict as a perfect opportunity and exploited every argument and emotional crack to gradually push Susanna aside. Soon she would be practically isolated inside the government palace. The children would openly take their father's side, and that's when the always attentive and indulgent Uncle Vladi reappeared. He would give them tips, learn their likes, to win them over with gifts, gestures of affection, and constant attention. Nothing was accidental. Every detail fit into a carefully designed strategy. Montesinos had found something essential. Those 4 children were of utmost importance in the president's heart, his only truly vulnerable emotional area. After the separation, Vladimiro knew that controlling that intimate world meant controlling the boss, and that's exactly what happened. Finally, the decision was made. Alberto Fujimori, his 4 children, and the grandmother, Mutsue, would move to the 2nd floor of the CIN, the place where Montesinos wanted him. Suddenly, they had the same schedule. They slept from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. and met from midnight to 4 or 5 a.m. In those shadowy hours, they discussed the many matters that were already burning, those that were just beginning to take shape, and those that were yet to come. Both understood politics as a war and considered intelligence to be the most powerful weapon, one that was built with information. Vladimiro was obsessed with it. He needed to know everything, to be aware of every detail, to anticipate every move. In a hidden room of the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional, he had an entire wall fitted with 25 black and white screens that stayed on constantly. Some showed the main avenues of Lima, others watched the entrances and exits of the international airport. Several monitored other Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional offices, and a few spied on whoever was necessary. Allies, opponents, activists, and top military officers all were caught in Montesinos' phone and video surveillance web. Facing that digital wall, he felt his vision expanding, so he focused on improving and expanding it. To do this, he purchased the most advanced devices from New York spy shops. After all, that was his essence, that of a spy who needed to have everything and everyone in his sights, enemies, allies, and even the president himself. However, in front of him, Vladimiro adopted an almost instinctive attitude of submission, a calculated respect, a carefully executed reverence that made Alberto Fujimori feel like the real boss, the absolute owner of everything they did. After all, he was the one who showed his face, who took the credit. Meanwhile, Montesinos seemed to enjoy the opposite realm, that dark territory where he could grow without being seen. From the shadows, he could amass an even deeper control. He didn't want public recognition, just control. For Alberto Fujimori, there were countless reasons to trust his advisor, so he did so fully, giving him a blank check both morally and financially. Montesinos managed an unlimited budget, free from oversight, a stream of resources that no one audited, which he could use without giving any explanations. Fujimori even issued a decree that expanded the functions of the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional and subordinated it directly to the presidency, eliminating the obligation to report to the prime minister. Vladimiro would use these freedoms, along with the contacts he had cultivated over decades, to do many things. One of them, of course, would be to boost the business that had made him a millionaire, even before reaching power: drug trafficking. Now, he held a privileged position. He was the contact for the CIA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the United States Embassy. If in the 70s, when he was just an advisor to Minister Mercado Harim during the Velasco Alvarado government, he had managed to give them valuable information now from the top of the state, he could be infinitely more useful to the interests of the United States government. This allowed him to build an increasingly close relationship with the American intelligence services. They, fascinated by his efficiency, began to fund him with about $1 million a year to support the fight against drugs, strengthen security, and, above all, obtain exclusive and strategic information from the region. For them, the presidential advisor was an oracle, an indispensable strategist. But Vladimiro, true to his style, didn't answer to just one flag. He played both sides. While receiving millions from the United States, he also protected Peruvian and Colombian drug traffickers for similar amounts. One of these protected individuals was Demetrio Chavez Peña Herrera, better known as Vaticano, the biggest Peruvian drug lord at the time and owner of the basic paste production in the Huallaga Valley. Years later, Vaticano told authorities he paid Montesinos $50,000 a month to run a secret airstrip without military interference. He said this allowed the armed forces to provide him with active protection. He also said that both General Hermosa Rios and President Alberto Fujimori knew about this and other secret agreements Montesinos maintained. If you want to know more details about the dark and curious relationship between the Vatican and Vladimiro, I suggest you watch this video later. Outraged by the network of corruption growing before his eyes, General Luis Palomino, then the chief of the anti-drug police, decided to break the silence, fully aware of the danger he was facing. He arrived at the United States Embassy wearing a bulletproof vest. There, in front of American diplomats, he reported that Vladimiro was systematically sabotaging the joint efforts between Peru and the United States to fight drug trafficking. But his warning was ignored. Despite all the signs, Vladimiro still had Washington's trust. The CIA even openly expressed its support, describing him as an indispensable pillar in the fight against drugs. Top American officials weren't naive. They protected him not out of belief in his innocence, but because he remained very useful to them. They knew that Montesinos negotiated with certain drug traffickers, but at the same time, he delivered results that no one else could offer them. He eliminated some and protected others, but overall it was still favorable. So, the United States tolerated corruption from an effective ally, someone who on the surface seemed to be making progress in the war on drugs, but in the shadows was weaving his own deals. For the CIA, that relationship was a convenient exchange that allowed them to have access to privileged intelligence services. The Drug Enforcement Administration, on the other hand, watched these contradictions with growing discomfort, but there was little they could do against the political machinery. Of course, Vladimiro only protected those who paid what he demanded. That's why, when Vaticano refused to double the agreed amount and pay $100,000 a month for the use of the airstrips, Montesinos didn't hesitate. He gave a thumbs down and ordered his capture, unaware that the man would soon be among the first to publicly expose him. Of course, Vaticano wasn't his only client or his only source. By the middle of the decade, Montesinos' network extended its tentacles into even more lucrative businesses, like the international drug transportation in large shipments using military means and clandestine channels. Later investigations would reveal that between 1993 and 1994, significant shipments were sent to Miami using aircraft from the Peruvian Air Force, operated by low-ranking military personnel who acted as pawns within a very large game board. Paradoxically, while all this was happening in the shadows, the government, with United States support, was launching aggressive operations to reduce air drug trafficking to Colombia. Some small planes were shot down, others captured. On the surface, the government was achieving great successes in the fight against drugs, but it was just an illusion. While some routes were destroyed with media spectacle, others, the ones managed by Montesinos' network, flourished untouched. This way, shipments multiplied both by air and by sea. The pattern was clear, exploiting the military structure and privileged information from the CIA and Drug Enforcement Administration, and his enormous influence over judges and prosecutors. Vladimiro made sure that his drug trafficking allies' merchandise left the country without obstacles, while he filled his pockets with millions. But not everything could remain in the shadows, nor as perfectly hidden as he would have wished. In 1996, the case that would shake the regime would break out, the presidential plane scandal. In an old Boeing 707, of the Air Force, which until recently had served as the presidential plane, 169 kilograms of cocaine were found meticulously hidden. The destination was Russia, and among the crew was none other than an aide-de-camp to President Fujimori. The news sparked dark rumors, forbidden questions, and a devastating suspicion. The complicity could be much higher up than anyone imagined. Just 2 months later, another hard blow to the government's credibility arrived: the Narco-Ship scandal. Canadian authorities found more than 150 kilos of drugs on several ships of the Peruvian Navy, an unprecedented scandal that left the institution's image in ruins. The official response was outrageous. The government only blamed naval technicians, non-commissioned officers, and low-ranking staff, as if an operation of such magnitude could be carried out without the approval of higher-ranking officers. An alibi so flimsy it bordered on insulting. But despite this and other scandals that rocked the decade, the Narco-State network kept growing. It wouldn't be until the late 1990s when international pressure increased and the evidence began to pile up like an avalanche. But by the mid-1990s, everything seemed under control. The government enjoyed broad approval, even more so after the Cenepa War, that brief but fierce conflict fought between January and February of 1995. The outbreak happened when Peru was still bleeding inside. The war against terrorism had left the country exhausted and weakened, especially along its northern border. Ecuador saw it and didn't miss the opportunity. For decades, Peru had been considered militarily superior, but now the balance had shifted. The Cenepa became a green hell, marked by fighting in the dense jungle, difficult logistics, and aerial duels. After weeks of fighting, international pressure led to a ceasefire. Militarily, the result was a technical draw, but Montesinos took charge of controlling the narrative and shaping public perception, turning that uncertain outcome into a great national triumph. He worked from the shadows on a precise communication strategy that allowed the government to present the end of the war as a victory, as an act of recovered dignity, something that the population, eager for good news after years of horror, embraced with fervor. The regime's popularity skyrocketed, national pride was reignited, and Montesinos was one of the invisible architects of that symbolic victory. Not only manipulating the narrative, he also controlled the flow of military intelligence, coordinated strategic interceptions, and managed urgent arms acquisitions. Of course, he didn't miss the chance to turn all of that into a big business. The government bought 18 MiG-29 fighter jets and 18 Sukhoi 25S from Belarus through inflated contracts that exceeded $500 million. Vladimiro approached these negotiations as he always did whenever he had the chance. He expanded the supplier pool, encouraged competition, and selected the best one, not for efficiency or strategy, but for the juiciest cut he could secure for himself. It is estimated that just from that series of purchases, he pocketed around $48 million. And while that torrent of money flowed into his hands, the government's popularity grew at just the right moment. The re-election was just around the corner, and Vladimiro, as if he were an alchemist, managed to turn a bloody conflict into political capital and personal fortune. Can you estimate the size of his ego at that moment? Maybe it's incalculable. Vladimiro was a man who had stopped walking on the ground and started walking on the illusion of his own omnipotence. Every political triumph, every maneuver that turned out perfectly, fed the feeling that the whole country revolved around his shadow. And to a large extent, it was true. His influence was so vast that it seemed to envelop everything. And this power would inevitably extend for 5 more years, since on April 9th, 1995, Alberto Fujimori was re-elected in the first round with 64.4% of the votes, while the former United Nations Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar barely reached 21.8%. It was a historic result, the last time that in Peru, a president would win an election in the first round. But in both of their minds, that was just the beginning, since the Green Plan envisioned between 2 and 3 continuous decades in power. So at the beginning of 1996, Vladimiro started to move the pieces with his usual precision, already thinking about a third term. This path began with a decisive move: the approval of the Law of Authentic Interpretation, a legal maneuver that allowed the reinterpretation of the 1993 Constitution. To assert that Fujimori's election in 1990 did not count for re-election purposes, since it had occurred before the new Constitution. That year, drug trafficking scandals also broke out. Some newly elected congressmen demanded an investigation into the infiltration of drug traffickers in the state and the growing accusations against advisor Montesinos. However, he activated his network of influence to block any attempt at investigation. On August 22, 1996, Congress, which was largely dominated by Cambio 90, refused to even admit the accusation for debate, with 71 votes against and 39 in favor. The ruling party closed ranks and shelved the matter. In the media sphere, these accusations didn't prosper either. The press was controlled and the country had a very favorable context for the regime's image. Due to internal pacification, controlled inflation, and sustained economic growth, after so many years of darkness, Peru was experiencing a rare period of stability and hope for peace. This was so valuable that many preferred to look the other way at any sign of irregularity. For a significant part of the population, those accusations were nothing more than maneuvers by the opposition to destabilize a government that had been doing things right, and this perception would grow even more. In April 1997, after the successful rescue of hostages at the Japanese ambassador's residence sparked renewed national pride, Lima's streets filled with applause. Television showed the entire operation, and the government capitalized on it as an absolute political triumph. If you want to fully know the truth behind this story, I invite you to watch it in its entirety on the channel. And if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you'll help bring many more stories like this one. The success of Operation Chavin de Huántar not only represented one of the highest points of popularity for the government, it was also a decisive turning point for Vladimiro Montesinos, a man who had made the shadows his home. He felt the temptation of public recognition for the first time. A new spark of ambition ignited within him. His victories had only been celebrated in closed circles, but the roar of national applause seduced him, pushing him to cross a line he had always respected. Days after the rescue, Vladimiro Montesinos appeared for the first time on television cameras. He did so in a joint interview with President Fujimori, recorded in one of the Servicio de Inteligencia National rooms, both sitting in different armchairs but dressed in almost identical suits, portrayed as two figures who shared the same command, the same pulse of power. Fujimori introduced him as his right-hand man, as the top representative of Peruvian intelligence, and stated that they worked together, fully dedicated to serving the country, a joint effort that had brought great benefits to Peru, among them the Chavin de Huántar operation. One thing was undeniably true: Montesinos worked tirelessly at the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional. He never stopped. He was always spying, scheming, analyzing the next move on his board. And he was a voracious player, capable of handling multiple games simultaneously without neglecting any of them. These injected him with so much adrenaline that he never got bored. He could work all day and all night, sleeping just a few hours. Over time, this extreme way of operating stopped being a habit and became his only way of existing. His life had no pauses. Part of his time was dedicated to serving the country, carrying out essential operations for the functioning of the state. Another part he spent consolidating the web of power he had patiently woven, and another in continuing to line his own pockets. But the strangest thing was that he didn't seem to have the time or the need to truly enjoy all that enormous accumulated wealth. Holidays didn't exist for him, much less vacations. His life went by in marathon workdays, where day and night blended together under the artificial light of the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional. But that didn't mean he didn't enjoy certain excessive luxuries. In 1996, Vladimiro built one of the most unsettling symbols of his power, his iconic bunker at Arica Beach. First, he built a house, then began buying neighboring homes one by one, offering amounts so irresistible no owner could refuse. In total, there were 5, and once they were his, he ordered the construction of underground tunnels to connect them. These were equipped with steel doors, hidden passageways, and multiple escape routes. Vladimiro joined his 5 houses into a complex of more than 2,000 square meters, a fortress designed by himself. Thinking that something might happen to him, a conspiratorial faction of the army could try to attack him. Because if there was something Montesinos feared, it was that as his power grew, so did his enemies. That's why he reinforced the walls with metal plates to stop projectiles and hid underground entrances beneath artificial gardens and fake jacuzzis. There was no doubt, the more powerful he became, the deeper his paranoia grew. The Arica Beach bunker wasn't his only property. Vladimiro also owned a nearly 1,200 square meter mansion on Velasco Estate's 12th block, valued at over $2.2 million. Another, even more ostentatious, is in the exclusive Les Casuarinas neighborhood, and valued at $4.5 million, along with other properties across Lima. Of course, none of them were under his name. El Doc could make mistakes, but not such basic ones. To hide his properties and accounts, he used a carefully selected network of front men. Key figures included Victor Venero, Luis Duturburu, Juan Valencia, and Enrique Gamarra. All of them became key players in channeling the enormous sums from his illicit enrichment. They lent their names and those of their relatives to register houses, companies, and above all, bank accounts in tax havens. But Montesinos' wealth was vast. Various investigations estimate that during his years in power, the wealth he amassed reached nearly $1 billion. Not counting everything he spent lavishly during that decade, hiding such an amount was a great challenge. A complex structure of offshore accounts in the Bahamas, Luxembourg, Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Panama was necessary, complemented by transit accounts in the United States, Mexico, Bolivia, and other countries. Vladimiro spent countless hours designing mechanisms to hide money he could never fully enjoy, or at least not for long. Perhaps one of the luxuries he enjoyed most in his daily life was his extravagant collection of jewelry and watches. A collection of 152 pieces, including 39 Swiss gold watches, some valued at up to 500,000 sols, 76 pairs of gold cufflinks with diamonds, 18 rings, 6 chains with gold plates and diamonds, as well as badges, keychains, and accessories encrusted with precious stones. Many of these pieces would remain hidden for years until the day they were seized. But the luxuries that truly defined his life were not the ones that sparkled, but those that revolved around him and his absolute comfort. For example, Vladimiro loved to eat well. Among his most frequent guests, the phrase became popular that nowhere in Lima did people eat better than at the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional. The kitchen was run by his sister, Maria Montesinos, but the real person in charge was a prestigious chef, brought in from one of the great and luxurious hotels in the capital, accompanied by a team of 12 people. If there was something Vladimiro enjoyed, it was having people at his disposal, serving him, grooming him, taking care of his clothes, his hair, his nails, and his personal hygiene. He also needed constant assistance with technological devices, as he was completely incapable of handling them by himself. He barely knew how to turn on a computer and didn't understand anything about how those modern devices he compulsively bought worked. On the other hand, Vladimiro had a small personal army, an elite unit that answered only to him, known as the Zeus Group. Although he affectionately called them the Little Bears, it was ironic because there was nothing affectionate about the way he treated them. He was extremely strict, paying attention to everything: badges out of place, the position of their hands when standing at attention, the shine of their shoes. If someone failed to meet his standards, punishment was immediate, from exhausting exercises to physical aggression. He would stick pins into their hands, burn their skin with a cigarette, or hit them with a hose. Everyone was afraid of him. No one dared to disobey or contradict him. But they talked behind his back, whispered, criticized his character, and nicknamed him Crazy Manguera, a nickname that mixed mockery, fear, and resignation. Vladimiro had added large doses of sadism to his military training. His command structure was so brutally vertical that the people under his authority ceased to exist as individuals. They were treated as replaceable parts, expendable gears, and at times with total indifference. But even so, they stayed there, since they received excellent salaries, generous bonuses, and expensive gifts on their birthdays and at Christmas. Montesinos understood that money could buy loyalty, and he enjoyed seeing it proven daily. Over the years, he attracted many people. Some were just simple tools, temporary servants, but others managed to reach much higher levels of trust. Among them, one figure stood out above all the others. Her name was Matilda Pinchi Pinchi. They had met many years before when he worked as a lawyer defending smugglers and saving them from jail. Matilda had been one of them. Vladimiro managed to get her out of a 4-year sentence, and since then, their relationship began to grow closer. It became a mix of financial, friendly, sentimental, and secret matters. Their bond evolved, changed form many times, but it was never broken. Montesinos fully trusted her and her loyalty, so much so that he kept her by his side even when he reached the top. There, she became his personal administrator, his absolutely trusted housekeeper, the one in charge of making confidential payments, and many other tasks that only she could be entrusted with. But perhaps her most important role was simply to listen to him. Matilda was the woman he preferred to talk to after every important meeting. He immediately looked for her to share everything, every detail, suspicion, small victory, and fear. She was his emotional outlet. Vladimiro apparently split the ideal woman into 3 parts. The first was Trinidad, his legal wife, the mother of his daughters with whom he hardly spoke. The second was Matilda, the intelligent, patient, loyal woman, always willing to listen to him. And the third was Jacqueline Beltran, according to many, the great love of his life. Jacqueline was a young secretary of 25 who started working at the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional. She never imagined the country's most powerful man would become instantly obsessed with her, showering her with luxuries and privileges she never dreamed of. That powerful man would be dazzled by the beauty of that woman, 23 years younger than him, and would risk everything just to fulfill her desires, even those she initially refused to fulfill. Jacqueline managed to exert a devastating psychological power over him, so much so that she was able to break that strict work discipline, that monastic routine that defined him for her. For her, he stopped sleeping at the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional, his favorite refuge, and began spending nights at his house on Areca Beach, ready to enjoy life by her side. Their relationship was intense, possessive, affectionate, jealous, painful, threatening, and sexually eccentric. A dangerous and fascinating story that I will reveal uncensored in a separate video, exclusive for the members of this channel. Join this community that grows every day and enjoy this and many other unpublished stories. In this way, you also contribute a lot to the growth of this project, but don't worry if it's not possible for you right now. I will also upload Vladimiro Montesinos and his obsession with Jacqueline Beltran to my Facebook channel, where you can watch the full story and many of the best fragments from other stories. You'll find the link in the description. By 1997, Montesinos had consolidated almost absolute control over the judiciary and the public prosecutor's office. With a mix of blackmail, bribes, and direct pressure from the executive branch, he placed loyal judges in key positions. The goal was twofold: ensure his impunity and make the judicial system a weapon to destroy any opponent. Every judge, every prosecutor, every secretary ended up becoming just another cog in the huge machine he himself had designed. During the last years of the regime, Vladimiro held all the strings of power in his hands, controlled the executive from the shadows, directed the legislative branch as he pleased, and managed the judiciary at every level. The same thing happened with electoral bodies, the armed forces and the national police, but his reach went even further. He also infiltrated Superintendencia Nacional de Administración Tributaria, a key institution for monitoring and suffocating businessmen, industries, and financial groups that could become a threat to the regime. Montesinos had built one of the largest and most sophisticated corruption and control apparatuses in the history of Latin America. The problem was that he couldn't hide those uncomfortable revelations about the Narco-State or his own criminal past. These were beginning to erode his image and that of the government. For him, that was intolerable. He needed to neutralize it, silence the voices, erase any threat, and that need turned into a new obsession. It was then that he began a massive purchase of editorial lines, systematically bribing the owners and executives of the country's main television networks. The amounts were grotesque. Montesinos went on to distribute $3 million a month among the most influential channels, ensuring favorable coverage and absolute media protection. As part of the plan, he inflated state advertising spending by 52%, rewarding obedient media and suffocating those who doubted. In exchange for these payments, he only demanded two things: total loyalty and editorial control, with no exceptions. So, from the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional offices, the content of practically all open signal newscasts was edited. There, smear campaigns against opponents were ordered, headlines were imposed, investigations were prohibited, and any reference to scandals that could trouble the regime was banned. Vladimiro used a perverse scheme to prevent betrayals. He forced the media owners to sign illegal contracts where the agreed informational bias was detailed, and then he recorded every money delivery on video. Thus, through bribery and coercion, he managed to get the main television channels, mainly channels 2, 4, 5, 9, and 13, to fully align themselves with Fujimorismo. Only a small cable channel called Canal N remained independent. Montesinos saw it as irrelevant. With a small audience, he calculated it wasn't worth the effort or investment. Paradoxically, it would be this very small channel that would broadcast for the first time the video that would forever change the history of Peru. The one that showed the exact moment when Vladimiro Montesinos handed $15,000 in cash to Congressman Alberto Curi to switch to the official party's bench. Those images would trigger the biggest scandal of the regime and mark its final collapse. But this collection of revealing tapes, dubbed the Vladivideos, would come a little later. At the end of 1999, the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional received between $8 and $9 million a month from the state to keep that gigantic power machine they had built running smoothly. The elections of the year 2000 were getting closer, and it was essential to have it operating efficiently. Logistically, Vladimiro already had everything prepared. He had loyal people infiltrated in the National Office of Electoral Processes, the National Jury of Elections, and the National Registry of Identification and Civil Status. This allowed him to manipulate electoral rolls, favor disputed records, and even intervene in the final count. The board was tilted in his favor, but that wasn't enough. At that crucial stage, the media would be more important than ever, and not just the television channels. Montesinos had discovered that those sensationalist newspapers with massive circulation were the ones closest to the people. Those cheap newspapers with flashy colors, street language, and explosive headlines, known as the Chicha newspapers. These would become powerful propaganda weapons, capable of attacking the opposition by fabricating fake scandals, ridiculing rivals, and manipulating the opinion of a huge sector of the population, vulnerable people with little education and limited access to truthful information. Vladimiro noticed that there were a lot of these readers and that they were highly impressionable, so he didn't miss the chance to try to manipulate them, to shape their perception, to direct their emotions and their vote. On December 27, 1999, a smiling Alberto Fujimori appeared on national television to announce that he would run for a third term, stating he was doing it to keep building a country with development and credibility. From that moment on, the main streets throughout the country were covered with the party's slogan. The Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional spared no resources. The re-election machinery was set in motion with brutal speed. Thousands of t-shirts, soccer balls, hats, and calendars, all stamped with the Peru 2000 logo, began circulating. And soon, in every corner of the country, a melody would start to play that would be etched into the collective memory, called the Rhythm of Chino. That catchy techno-cumbia would flood local radios, plazas, fairs, markets, human settlements, and more, with thousands of cassettes distributed for free, until the whole country ended up humming that song, which became the propaganda anthem of the campaign. However, on the other side of the board, something unexpected was starting to happen. Alejandro Toledo's rallies were drawing huge crowds all over the country. The opposition, which for many years had been scattered and weakened, began to unite around his candidacy. For many, Toledo became the only hope to stop Fujimori from staying in power indefinitely. The latest polls raised alarms within the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional. Montesinos watched with concern as Toledo advanced with unexpected strength, enough to cast doubt on the 50% of votes needed for Fujimori to win once again in the first round. On April 9th, 2000, as soon as the polling stations closed, the broadcast of an exit poll shook the country. The virtual winner of the elections was Alejandro Toledo. At the Sheraton Hotel, the news hit like lightning. The crowd erupted in jubilation. Toledo was lifted on shoulders, wrapped in an euphoria that seemed to announce a historic change. But meanwhile, in the halls of the Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional, the atmosphere was different. There, far from the cameras, mechanisms, pressures, and strategies began to be activated to manage the result. The official count took 3 days, and when the numbers were finally published, the surprise was absolute. Fujimori ended up with 49.85%, compared to his opponent's 40.4%. He failed to win in the first round. After all, wasn't this convincing proof that Peru was living in a true democracy? The message had been sent. Now it was time to make sure there would be no more setbacks in the second round. And that's what happened. Fujimori won with a resounding 74.3% of the valid votes. However, that victory did not bring calm. The days of anxiety were not over. They were just about to begin. Despite not winning, the unexpected rise of Toledo caused a devastating side effect for Fujimorismo. They would not have a parliamentary majority. Out of the 120 seats at stake, they had only won 52. Governing without a compliant Congress would be nearly impossible, and Montesinos knew this well, so he acted immediately. Between the second round and the July 28 inauguration, a notable phenomenon began to emerge during this tense period. Several newly elected congressmen announced that, after some reflection, they had decided to join the ruling party's caucus, since the best thing for Peru's governability would be to work focused on the same goal. Of course, this was nothing more than a rehearsed speech. Behind each case, there was a negotiated price which ranged between $15,000 and $30,000 per congressman. Vladimiro had standardized both the bribes and the process. Each of them had to go through the same Servicio de Inteligencia Nacional room, where they would be secretly recorded while receiving the payment in cash. Whether it was to switch sides or to stay in their own group undercover, ready to inform or switch sides at the first call. In the days leading up to the July 28 presidential inauguration, thousands of Peruvians from remote areas arrived in Lima. Alejandro Toledo had called for a massive march. His presence channeled popular discontent, united scattered groups, and organized the resistance against a deeply contested election. It was a social outburst that signaled exhaustion, but also hope. However, none of that would be enough to bring down the regime. The Fujimorist machinery had a structure designed to perpetuate itself and would not fall due to citizen pressure, massive marches, or fiery speeches. This breaking point would come from a much deeper, more unexpected, and extremely powerful reason: the definitive rupture between Vladimiro Montesinos and the CIA. After many years of being its most useful and important ally in Latin America, the agency finally got fed up with its old spy friend. The CIA long tolerated his corruption and drug trafficking ties. They knew perfectly well who he was, they knew what he did, but they kept quiet because overall he was useful to them. No one in the entire region provided them with the information that Doc gave them. However, everything changed when they discovered his last big business: the sale of 10,000 Avtomat Kalashnikova, 47 assault rifles to the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia and Colombia, the guerrilla group funded by drug trafficking and a direct enemy of the United States government. In 1999, Montesinos had negotiated Peruvian military weapons to supply a group that the CIA itself was fighting in its war on terrorism. He sold thousands of rifles to the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia in exchange for multi-million-dollar cash payments, deceiving not only his own country, but also his most powerful allies. For the CIA, that was not just a simple act of corruption, it was a huge betrayal. At that moment, they realized something they had suspected for a while. Vladimiro had become too powerful, too autonomous, and dangerously unpredictable. A player out of control, a geopolitical risk with access to secrets, weapons, money, and entire governments. They had tolerated him for years because his usefulness outweighed these dangers. But now the balance had shifted. Montesinos stopped being an asset and became a threat. On September 8th, 2000, Alberto Fujimori traveled to New York to attend the United Nations Millennium Summit, accompanied by his daughter and then First Lady Keiko Fujimori. Everything followed the usual protocol until, at the end of the summit, he unexpectedly received a call from the United States Department of State. There he heard something that left him bewildered. With diplomatic coldness, they reproached him for the results of the last elections, bluntly stating that they had not been democratic. Fujimori reacted angrily and raised his voice indignantly. "I am a Democrat." But the response was blunt and devastating. "If you want to continue having our support, Mr. President, you will have to make changes at the highest level. You have to ask Montesinos to leave." At that moment, Fujimori realized that something had changed forever. Keiko took his hand and said, "See, Daddy, this is exactly what I've been telling you." What happened after that meeting would not only mark the fall of the presidential advisor, but the complete collapse of the regime. And it would mark the beginning of one of the most interesting, dramatic, and darkest chapters in the life of Vladimiro Montesinos. The question is, will this be the last one? That's something only time will tell. Comment if you would like to see the next part of the story on this channel soon. And don't forget to subscribe so that many more stories like this will come your way. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Goodbye.